6:17 in the morning. Ethan Mercer stood outside the back door of the Crimson Table, his $3,000 leather shoes replaced by old sneakers bought from a secondhand shop on Pike Street. His Patek Philippe watch sat in the safe at his penthouse, leaving only a faint tan line on his wrist, a trace of 15 years of wearing it. He took a deep breath. The Seattle morning air was cold and damp, carrying the smell of garbage bins from the alley and the distant sound of delivery trucks. His right hand gripped a job application folder, pages carefully prepared with a fake name, fake address, and a completely fabricated work history. Daniel Brooks, 34 years old. Experience: waiter at a small restaurant in Portland that had closed. References: none. Ethan looked down at his hands, hands that had never carried a tray, never scrubbed a pot, never trembled with fear of being fired. Those hands had signed million-dollar checks, had shaken hands with Fortune 500 CEOs, had swirled wine glasses at parties where a single bottle cost more than a month's salary for the person serving it. Now those hands were shaking, not from the cold. 3 months ago, Ethan received a letter. No sender's name, no return address, just a plain white envelope secretly slipped into his private mailbox at the office. A mailbox that only his secretary and security team knew the code to. Inside were 3 sheets of paper. The first, a photo of a pay stub, hours worked, 67 per week, wages below state minimum when averaged out. A note in the margin in red pen: this is the truth. The second, a list of employees who had quit in the past 2 years. 43 names. Some were crossed out with the words forced out. Others couldn't take it. And one name circled in red with 2 words, hospitalized. The third, a handwritten letter. Mr. Mercer, you built your empire on advertisements about premium dining experiences and dedicated service. But do you know how the people who create that experience actually live? Your restaurant is hell. The people who created it are getting rich. The people who serve are slowly dying. I'm not asking for money. I'm not making threats. I just want you to know the truth. What you do with it is your choice. Someone who once worked for you. Ethan read the letter 3 times. The first time he was angry. Who had the right to accuse him like this? Who had the right to secretly send these things to his private office? The second time he was skeptical. Maybe this was a scheme by a competitor. Maybe a disgruntled employee trying to extort him. The third time he looked at the photo of the pay stub and realized he didn't know how much his employees were paid. He didn't know how many hours they worked per week. He didn't know why 43 people had quit in 2 years. He had handed over all operations to Victor Nash, his best friend from college, the brother who had built the Crimson Table with him from a small restaurant into a chain of 15 locations across the West Coast. Victor was the person he had trusted absolutely for 8 years. Victor was the only person Ethan had ever called a true partner. Ethan didn't believe the letter, but from that night on, he couldn't sleep. Not because he feared being extorted, not because he worried about scandal, but because one question kept echoing in his head like an unending bell. If the letter is true, then what have I been doing for the past 8 years? The back door of the Crimson Table opened at 6:30. A middle-aged man in a white apron stained with sauce stepped out, trash bag in hand. He stopped when he saw Ethan. Looking for someone? I'm here to apply for a job. Ethan heard his own voice sound strange, smaller, weaker, lacking the confident tone of someone used to giving orders. I saw you're hiring waiters. The man looked him over from head to toe. His gaze paused at his hands, too clean, too soft, then moved down to his shoes, old but not worn in the way of someone used to standing for 8 hours. Go inside, find Mr. Nash's office at the end of the hallway. Ethan nodded. Thank you. The man didn't respond. He tossed the trash bag into the dumpster with the motion of someone who had done this thousands of times, then went back into the kitchen without looking back. Victor Nash's office was at the end of a narrow hallway behind an oak door, the expensive kind that Ethan remembered approving the invoice for 6 years ago. Back then, Victor had said, the manager's office needs to look professional. Customers sometimes want to meet the person in charge. Now, standing before that door, Ethan wondered how many employees had knocked to ask for time off, to request extra shifts, to ask for fair treatment, and what answer they had received behind this door. He knocked. Come in. Victor sat behind his desk, hair neatly styled, white shirt perfectly pressed. His familiar smile appeared when he saw who entered. The smile Ethan had seen hundreds of times in board meetings, at networking events, in the company's promotional photos. But today, Ethan looked at that smile with different eyes. "You're the applicant?" Victor asked, eyes not leaving his laptop screen. "Yes, Daniel Brooks." Victor gestured for him to sit, still not looking up. His fingers clicked away on the keyboard for a few more seconds, then finally turned to face him. Ethan held his breath. He had changed his appearance, shaved differently, wore round-framed glasses, dyed his hair slightly lighter. But this was Victor, the man who had known him since age 18, who had gotten drunk with him in the dorms, who had stood beside him on the opening day of the first Crimson table. Victor looked at Daniel for 2 seconds, then asked, "Can you start today?" No questions about experience, no checking references, no reading the resume. Ethan swallowed. "Yes." "Good." Victor pushed an apron across the desk. "Afternoon shift starts at 11 o'clock. Find Marcus. He'll train you. Hourly wage plus tips split equally among all staff through the restaurant's welfare fund. Any questions?" "Welfare fund," Ethan repeated. For the first time, something flashed in Victor's eyes. Quick. Just a fraction of a second. But Ethan saw it. The look of someone assessing how much the other person knows. "Company policy," Victor said, voice still even. 15% of tips go into a common fund to support employees when needed. Everyone benefits when needed. When needed means when. Victor frowned. "You ask a lot of questions for someone new." Ethan fell silent. "Get out there." Victor turned back to his screen. "Don't make me remind you about punctuality." Marcus was a black man in his 50s, with broad shoulders beginning to hunch from 12 years of carrying trays and calloused hands from 12 years of scrubbing pots when they were short-staffed. When Ethan found him in the kitchen, he was stacking glasses on a shelf with the mechanical motion of someone who could do this in his sleep. "You're the new guy?" Marcus asked without turning around. "Daniel, Mr. Nash told me to find you." Marcus set down the last glass, then turned. His eyes swept over Ethan, the same kind of look as the man at the back door, and stopped at his hands. "Never worked as a waiter before, have you?" Ethan started to lie, but Marcus's gaze wouldn't allow it. "No." Marcus nodded as if he'd already known. "At least you don't lie. Good. I hate liars." He handed Ethan a silver tray. "First lesson, hold the tray with your palm, not your fingers. Your fingers will tire after 2 hours. Your palm will tire after 8 hours, but at least you won't spill food on customers." Ethan took the tray. It was lighter than he expected when empty, but he knew that once 6 plates of food were on it, the weight would be completely different. "Second lesson," Marcus said, voice lower. "Don't look Nash in the eyes. Don't ask for time off on Fridays or Saturdays. Don't ask about tips. Why? Because you want to keep your job." Marcus looked straight into Ethan's eyes. "And if you have family, never let him know." Before Ethan could ask more, the bell from the kitchen rang. Marcus turned away. "Afternoon shift starting. Follow me." The afternoon shift at the Crimson table was like a never-ending storm. Ethan ran between tables, carrying trays, taking orders, cleaning up. Work he had never done and never thought he would do. His feet ached after the first 2 hours. His back stiffened after 4. And when the clock struck 6 o'clock in the evening, he felt as if someone had beaten his entire body with a baseball bat. But what exhausted him wasn't just the physical labor. It was what he saw. Denise, the 60-year-old woman with silver hair in a high bun, was called into Victor's office for requesting 1 day off the previous week. She came out with red-rimmed eyes and her schedule for the week cut from 5 shifts to 2. Tommy, the 22-year-old fresh graduate still holding on to the enthusiasm of someone who believed hard work would be rewarded, was assigned consecutive night shifts for 3 weeks straight with the excuse of needing training. And Maria, the 28-year-old, who was 6 months pregnant, still had to carry heavy trays because we don't have a policy for accommodating pregnant employees. Ethan saw everything, and he began to understand why 43 people had quit. She appeared at 7 in the evening. Ethan was sitting in a corner of the kitchen, back against the pot cabinet, legs stretched out on the cold floor. He couldn't remember the last time he'd eaten. Breakfast, probably. A protein bar swallowed quickly in his car before coming here. Now his stomach was screaming for food, but he was too tired to stand. Someone stopped in front of him. Ethan looked up. The girl, or rather the woman, was about 30 years old with brown hair tied up neatly and hazel eyes that showed no expression. She wore the same uniform as him, her apron with a yellow stain in the corner, as if it had been washed many times but never quite came clean. She said nothing, just placed in front of him half a sandwich, then walked away. Ethan watched her until her back disappeared through the kitchen door, then looked down at the sandwich. It was cold. The bread was slightly hard at the edges, as if it had been wrapped in a paper bag since morning. Inside was only a thin layer of cheese and a slice of tomato. No meat, no lettuce, no sauce. This was her lunch. He knew because he had seen her sitting alone in the corner of the storage room at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, eating exactly the other half of this sandwich. She had saved the other half, and now she was giving it to a complete stranger. Ethan picked up the sandwich. His hands trembled, not from the cold, not from hunger. He took a bite. The bland cheese spread over his tongue. The bread was slightly dried out. The tomato had no particular flavor, but it was the best thing Ethan had eaten in years. Not because of the taste, but because of the reason behind it. Her name is Lily. Marcus stood at the kitchen door looking at Ethan with unreadable eyes. Lily Dawson. Been here 3 years. Nobody knows much about her because she doesn't talk to anyone. We call her the ghost. Arrives earliest, leaves latest, works the most shifts, but never joins the after-work drinks or the break room gossip. Does she have family? Marcus was silent for a moment. A kid, a little girl. I don't know the details because Lily doesn't like people knowing her personal business. But once I heard her on the phone, her voice completely different from the cold exterior she shows at work. What about her husband? None, Marcus said shortly. Don't ask more. Lily doesn't like questions like that. Ethan nodded, but in his mind, an image was forming. A woman raising a child alone, working 14 hours a day, eating half a sandwich for lunch, and still willing to share the rest with a stranger. Why did she give me the sandwich? Marcus looked at him longer than usual. Because that's Lily. She doesn't talk much, but she sees everything. She saw you exhausted. She saw you hadn't eaten all day, and she acted. But that was her lunch. Yes, Marcus nodded. And that's why Lily is the best person here. Also why she's the most miserable. That night, Ethan didn't go back to his penthouse. He sat in his car in the parking lot behind the restaurant, looking at the remaining piece of sandwich in his hand, the last quarter that he couldn't bring himself to finish. He thought about Lily. He thought about the 14-hour shifts. He thought about the 15% of tips being skimmed into a welfare fund that no one ever received anything from. He thought about Victor, his best friend, his partner, the person he had trusted for 8 years. And for the first time in many years, Ethan Mercer cried, not out of self-pity, but because he realized a painful truth. He had built an empire where good people like Lily had to go hungry to share their meal with strangers, where people like Marcus had to teach new employees how to dodge the manager instead of how to do better work, where pregnant women still had to run like young people. He had signed million-dollar checks. He had received Entrepreneur of the Year awards. He had appeared on magazine covers with a confident smile and the slogan, "The Crimson Table," where every customer is royalty. But he had never asked, what about the employees? The sandwich in his hand had gone completely cold. Ethan looked at it one more time, then slowly finished it. The Seattle night was cold. Streetlights flickered in the drizzle, and in his luxury car parked between garbage bins and shipping containers, a billionaire sat alone, tears streaming down his face, asking himself what kind of person he had become. The first week passed in silence. Ethan, or Daniel, learned how to carry a tray without spilling, learned how to take orders without mistakes, learned how to smile at customers even when his legs wanted to give out. And most importantly, he learned how to observe. He observed Victor, his best friend, the man he had once called a brother from another mother, run the restaurant with the precision of a machine. Victor never yelled, never pounded tables, never said a harsh word, but he controlled through other means. A look, a sigh, a soft statement full of implication. I only want what's best for you, but if you can't handle the pressure. Ethan saw Victor cut Denise's hours after she requested time off to take her husband to chemotherapy. No email notification, no explanation, just a new schedule posted on the board with half the hours. Denise looked at the schedule, pale, but she didn't protest. She just lowered her head, worked her remaining shifts, and prayed that her husband wouldn't need more expensive medication. Ethan saw Tommy, the young man full of enthusiasm, gradually lose the light in his eyes after each consecutive night shift. Tommy started his shift at 10 o'clock at night, finished at 3 o'clock in the morning, then had to be back at 11 o'clock the next morning. He dozed off in the changing room. He ate dinner with coffee and granola bars. And when Tommy asked to switch to day shifts, Victor just smiled. "You're still young. This is an opportunity to train." Ethan saw Maria, the pregnant woman, sit down with heavy breaths after each time she carried a tray. Her feet swelled in her tight shoes. Her back hurt so much she had to brace herself with her hands every time she stood up. But Maria didn't dare ask for reduced work because she knew what had happened to others. And Ethan saw Lily. Lily worked like a machine that never stopped. Morning shifts, afternoon shifts, night shifts, any shift that was open, Lily took it. She never really took a lunch break, just ate quickly in the storage corner, 10 minutes, then returned to the restaurant floor. She never complained, never requested time off, never asked for anything. Her colleagues called her the ghost because she arrived earliest and left latest, but almost no one knew anything about her life outside the restaurant walls. Ethan began to notice small details. Lily never made phone calls in front of anyone. She always went to the parking lot or into storage when she needed to call. Sometimes through the narrow crack in the door, Ethan heard her voice. Gentle, warm, completely different from the coldness when working. "Mommy will be home soon, sweetheart. Did you take all your medicine? Breathe deep. Don't be scared. Mommy's here. Medicine. Breathe deep." A small child. Ethan didn't ask more. He remembered Marcus's words. Lily doesn't like questions about personal matters, but he observed. Every night after her shift, Lily counted her tips with worried eyes, the worry of someone calculating whether every cent would be enough or not. She folded the bills carefully, put them in her shirt pocket, and left in silence, never staying for drinks with colleagues, never joining in gossip, just working, getting paid, and disappearing into the Seattle night as if she had never existed. The incident happened in the third week. It was Saturday night, the busiest night of the week, when the Crimson Table hosted a VIP group from a large tech company, 20 people, private table, special menu, and pressure to serve perfectly. Lily was carrying a tray of appetizers to the VIP table when her phone in her apron pocket vibrated. She didn't look, continued working. The phone vibrated a second time, third, fourth. Ethan saw Lily's face go pale. She set down the tray, excused herself to the guests, and ran to the back. He followed. Lily stood in a corner of the hallway, phone pressed to her ear, voice trembling. "What? When? Which hospital? I'll be right there. Don't let Rosie be scared. Tell her mommy's coming." She hung up, hands still shaking. "What happened?" Ethan asked. Lily startled and turned around as if not expecting anyone to be there. Her eyes were red, but she wasn't crying. "My daughter, Rosie, she has chronic asthma and just had a severe attack. The babysitter called an ambulance." "Go," Ethan said immediately. "I'll tell the manager." "No," Lily cut him off, voice almost desperate. "I can't. There's a VIP group tonight. If I leave now, I'll lose my job." "But your daughter?" "I know," Lily said, voice shaking. "I know." She stood there in the narrow hallway like someone being torn in two. On one side was her daughter struggling to breathe in a hospital. On the other side was her job, the only source of income to pay for medicine, rent, doctors. Ethan saw that moment, the moment when a mother had to choose between her child and putting food on the table. That was the moment he decided to act. "She has to go." Victor looked up from his desk when Ethan, Daniel, walked into his office without knocking. "Excuse me, Lily, her daughter is in the hospital. She needs to go now." Victor frowned. He leaned back, hands clasped together, the posture that Ethan knew was a sign he was calculating. "There's a VIP group tonight," Victor said slowly. "Lily is our best server. If she leaves now, who will replace her?" "I will," Ethan said. "I'll cover her shift." Victor looked at him longer than usual. His eyes swept over Daniel, the new employee who had only been here 3 weeks, the one who dared walk into the manager's office to demand something. "You're new," Victor said, voice cold. "Don't get involved in things that aren't your business. Her daughter's in the hospital." "I heard. This is a human matter." Silence. Victor said nothing. He just looked at Daniel, the look that Ethan knew too well. It was the look Victor used to assess others, to decide if they were a threat or just a pawn not worth caring about. Finally, Victor nodded. Fine, but if there's any problem with the VIP group, you'll be responsible. Ethan didn't answer. He turned, found Lily. She was standing at the back door, purse in hand, face still pale. Go, Ethan said. I talked to the manager. Lily looked at him, eyes wide with surprise. What did you do? Doesn't matter. Go, your daughter needs you. Lily hesitated for a second. Then she turned and ran to the parking lot. Didn't have time to say thank you. Didn't have time to look back. Ethan stood watching until her old car disappeared into the night. Then he returned to the restaurant floor, carrying trays, taking orders, clearing tables. Everything Lily was supposed to do. 6 continuous hours. No breaks, no food. When the shift ended, Ethan could barely stand. He leaned against the hallway wall, breathing heavily, sweat soaking his shirt. But he didn't care about the exhaustion. He only thought about a mother sitting by her daughter's hospital bed and wondered if Rosie was okay. Ethan found the hospital at 11 at night. He hadn't planned to come. There was no reason to come. Lily hadn't invited him. Lily didn't even know who he really was. But he couldn't go home. His penthouse was waiting, 500 square meters of full amenities, a view of all of Seattle, and the cold silence of someone who had lived alone for too long. He didn't want to go back there, not tonight. Seattle Children's Hospital was in the north of the city, an old building with long corridors and flickering fluorescent lights. Ethan went through the emergency room, asked a nurse, and finally found Lily in the respiratory care unit. She was sitting on a plastic chair outside the patient room, head bowed, shoulders shaking. Ethan stopped a few meters away from her. He didn't know what to say. He was a stranger Lily only knew through 3 weeks of working together. He had no right to appear here, no right to ask questions, but he still stepped forward and sat down beside her. Said nothing, just sat there. Silence stretched for several minutes. Ethan heard the sound of a ventilator from inside the room, the steady beep-beep of the heart monitor, the footsteps of nurses moving in the corridor. Finally, Lily spoke. Thank you. Her voice was as if she had cried but had no more tears. For today. Don't mention it, Ethan said. You gave me half your lunch on my first day. I owe you. Lily turned to look at him for the first time really looked. Why do you remember? She asked. Ethan looked down at his hands that were becoming calloused after 3 weeks of work. Because it's been a long time since anyone gave me something without expecting anything in return, he said. Lily didn't respond. She turned to look into the patient room where a small girl lay on a bed with a breathing tube in her nose. Rosie, she said quietly. She's 5. Chronic asthma since she was 3. The doctor says it's genetic, but I think it's because of the lousy apartment we live in. Rusty air conditioner, mold on the walls, not enough money to move somewhere else. Ethan was silent. He didn't know what to say. My husband Ryan died in a car accident when Rosie was 2, Lily continued, voice even as if telling someone else's story. A truck lost control, hit his car. He died instantly. I got the call from the police at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I was feeding Rosie. She didn't understand why Mommy was crying. I'm sorry, Ethan said, knowing those 2 words weren't enough, but finding nothing else. Don't be sorry, Lily shook her head. It's not your fault. That's just life. Sometimes life hits you hard and you have to get back up. There's no other choice. She looked down at the bill in her hand, a white sheet of paper with bold numbers at the bottom. This time it's $2,300, as she said. Emergency, medication, overnight room. My insurance only covers part of it. The rest. She didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Ethan understood. The rest would come from extra shifts, skipped lunches, sleepless nights, worrying about next month's rent. Why don't you ask for more hours? Ethan asked, though he knew the answer. Lily laughed, a short, bitter laugh. You think I don't want to? I've asked many times. But Victor, he doesn't give extra hours to people with complicated personal issues. He said that, exact words. Lily, I want to help you, but you have a young child. You can't focus on work like the others. Do well in your current shifts first. Ethan clenched his fists, nails digging into his palms. Those were Victor's words, his best friend's words, the words of the person he had trusted for 8 years. I'm sorry, he repeated. I told you not to be sorry. Lily looked at him. Who are you to be sorry? You're just a new colleague. You haven't done anything wrong. Ethan wanted to say that he had done wrong, that he, not Daniel, but Ethan Mercer, had built this place, had approved the policies, had trusted Victor to run it, had never asked one simple question: are my employees okay? But he didn't say it. He just sat there beside a mother holding up the entire world by herself and wondered why it took him 35 years to understand the value of half a sandwich. 3 days after the night at the hospital, Lily had no one to watch Rosie. The usual babysitter, Oi, Osritu, an old lady who lived in the apartment below, had the flu. Lily couldn't afford professional childcare, and she couldn't miss work, so she brought Rosie to the restaurant. That was the first time Ethan saw Lily's daughter. Rosie was a small girl with curly brown hair and big eyes, just like her mother. She wore an old floral dress, slightly too big for her thin frame, and clutched a worn teddy bear, the kind someone might have given her years ago and never been replaced. Lily set Rosie up in a corner of the kitchen, out of customers' sight, but close enough for her to keep watch. The little girl sat quietly on a plastic chair, bare in her lap, drawing on scraps of paper with the only pencil in her backpack. Ethan walked by during break time. She was drawing a house, crooked, uneven, with 3 people standing outside. One tall, one short, and one smallest in the middle. "Who's this?" Ethan asked, sitting down beside her. Rosie looked up. Her big eyes looked at him with a child's curiosity, not afraid, not suspicious, just pure curiosity. "Mommy, me, and Daddy," she said, voice small but clear. "Daddy's in heaven, but I draw him here so Mommy won't be sad." Ethan looked at the drawing, the tiny house, 3 people without detailed faces, just circles for heads and sticks for arms and legs. But the man, the one Rosie called Daddy, was drawn most carefully, with a small heart on his chest. "What's your daddy's name?" Ethan asked. "Ryan." Rosie tilted her head. "Mommy says Daddy loved me and Mommy very much. Daddy went away before I got big, but he still watches me from heaven." She looked at him. "What's your name?" "Daniel. Daniel works with my mommy." "Yes. Do you have kids?" Ethan shook his head. "No." "How come you don't like kids?" The question from a 5-year-old hit somewhere in Ethan that he hadn't expected. Why didn't he have kids? Why hadn't he gotten married? Why did he live alone in a cold penthouse with lavish parties and women who only cared about his bank balance? "I haven't found the right person yet," Ethan said. Half the truth. Rosie nodded as if she understood. "My mommy too. Mommy says Daddy is hard to replace." She went back to her drawing, continuing to color. But the only pencil in her hand was one color: gray. "Why don't you use other colors?" Ethan asked. "I ran out." Rosie said it matter-of-factly, as if it were obvious. "Mommy said she'd buy me more, but she keeps forgetting." Ethan understood. Lily hadn't forgotten. Lily just didn't have the money. The next day, Ethan brought a box of colored pencils to the restaurant. 64 of them, every color of the rainbow and more. The most expensive kind in the office supply store, something Ethan would never have noticed before. But now, standing in front of the shelf, he had compared each box, read every label, and chosen the one with the most colors. He slipped the box into Rosie's bag when no one was looking. That afternoon, when Lily checked her daughter's bag, she stopped. Ethan saw her pick up the pencil box, look at it with unreadable eyes. Rosie squealed with joy, jumping around her mother, but Lily just stood still. At the end of the shift, she found him. "You bought this?" Lily asked, voice flat. Ethan started to lie, but Lily's eyes wouldn't allow it. "Maybe someone forgot it there," he said, a half-hearted lie. Lily looked at him for a long time, a very long time. "Who are you?" she asked quietly. The question wasn't asking for a name. Ethan understood. Lily was asking, "Why are you doing these things? Why do you care? Why is a complete stranger buying gifts for my daughter?" "Just a waiter," Ethan answered. Lily didn't say more. She turned away, but before she walked far, she stopped. "Thank you," she said, not looking back. "Rosie will be very happy." Then she left. Ethan stood watching, his chest tightening with a strange feeling. Not love, he didn't know what that was yet, but something close, warm, and painful all at once. He began to understand why Lily didn't smile. Smiling took energy, and Lily's energy had all gone to surviving. By week 4, Ethan had enough evidence. He had documented everything: the extended shifts without notice, the tips skimmed that no one ever received, the employees whose hours were cut for personal reasons, Victor's veiled threats disguised as concern. He called his lawyer from a private number, one that Victor didn't know. "Prepare the termination paperwork," Ethan said, "and check if there are any labor law violations we can prosecute." "When do you want to act, Mr. Mercer?" "As soon as possible." But Ethan made a mistake. He was too focused on fixing the system and forgot about the people. He wanted to help Lily not just with the pencils. He wanted to truly help her have enough money to treat Rosie, enough money to move to a better apartment, enough money not to skip half her lunch every day. He arranged secretly, through an accountant he trusted, for Lily to get extra shifts at a higher wage. Not much, just enough for her to receive a few hundred more dollars a month. He thought that was a way to help her without revealing his identity. But Victor noticed, a new employee like Daniel daring to stand up for a colleague. Then suddenly strange changes in the payroll system. Then the looks, the questions, the actions that didn't fit a normal waiter. Victor began investigating Daniel. He found the cracks faster than Ethan expected. The address on Daniel Brooks's job application didn't exist. The reference phone number didn't work. There was no record of him ever working in Portland. Victor didn't know who Daniel really was, but he knew this person was hiding something. Friday afternoon, Victor called Daniel into his office. "There's an important customer who wants to meet you privately," Victor said, smiling, still perfect as always. "They were very impressed with your service last week." Ethan didn't suspect anything. He followed Victor into a small meeting room at the back of the restaurant. The door closed behind him. There was no customer, only Victor standing beside a laptop open on the table. On the screen was a Google image search, and the result, Ethan Mercer, CEO of Mercer Hospitality Group, owner of the Crimson Table chain. "Hello, boss," Victor said, smile not reaching his eyes. Ethan stood frozen. In that moment, he saw everything collapse. His plan, everything he had tried to build over 4 weeks, the fragile trust he had gradually earned from his colleagues. All of it. "What are you planning to do?" Victor asked, voice still calm. "Record, take photos, collect evidence to fire me?" Ethan didn't answer. "I know you, Ethan." Victor stepped closer. "I've known you since you were 18. I know you don't have the courage to do the hard things. You always need someone else to clean up. That's why you hired me." "You deceived me," Ethan said, his voice steadier than he expected. "You stole money from employees. You exploited them for 8 years. I ran this restaurant," Victor cut in. "I made it profitable. I kept you rich. You think those perfect numbers on the reports came from where? Fell from the squash away, not from making people work 14 hours a day, not from cutting hours for someone whose husband is in chemo, not from threatening to fire a mother whose child is in the hospital." Victor laughed, a short, cold laugh. "You're so righteous now. 4 weeks as a waiter, and you think you understand suffering. You don't understand anything, Ethan. You're just playing detective. And when you get bored, you'll go back to your penthouse, drink your wine, and forget everything." "You're wrong." "Am I?" Victor tilted his head. "Then show me. Fire me right now in front of all the employees. Let them know who their real boss is. See how they react when they find out that the person they trusted for 4 weeks, good guy Daniel, is actually a billionaire playing undercover." Ethan was silent because he knew Victor was right. If he revealed his identity now, in this way, under Victor's control, he would lose everything. Not money or the company, but the trust of people like Marcus, like Denise, like Tommy, like Lily. Victor acted before Ethan could decide. He called all the employees into the kitchen. End of shift. When everyone was tired and just wanted to go home, Ethan stood beside him, unable to do anything. "I have an important announcement," Victor said, voice full of importance, "about our colleague Daniel." Everyone looked toward Ethan, Marcus, Denise, Tommy, Maria, and more than 20 others. They sat with skeptical eyes, waiting to see what the man who had deceived them would say. Victor was also there. Ethan had invited him, not to confront, but to witness. Lily sat in the back row, closest to the exit, as if ready to leave at any moment. "Daniel Brooks doesn't exist," Victor continued, smile triumphant. "This man is actually Ethan Mercer, owner of the Crimson Table, the boss of all of us." Silence. Ethan saw their faces change. Denise sighed with disappointment. Tommy avoided eye contact. Marcus stood still as a statue, and Lily, she stood as if turned to stone. Her eyes looking at him no longer held curiosity or warmth, only deep disappointment. "He came here to monitor you," Victor said, voice full of fake sympathy, "to find reasons to cut staff. Everything he said, everything he did, it was all acting." "No." Ethan tried to speak, but no one listened. They had already turned away. One by one, Marcus went first, then Denise, then Tommy. Lily left last. She looked at Ethan once, just once, then turned her back and walked out the door. Ethan chased Lily to the parking lot. Lily, please, let me explain. Lily stopped, didn't turn around. What do you want to explain? She asked, voice shaking. That you didn't lie? That everything you did wasn't for some other reason? I came here because I wanted to know the truth about my restaurant. I didn't know everything would... You bought pencils for my daughter. Lily cut him off, finally turning around. Her eyes were red, but there were no tears. You sat with me at the hospital. You worked my shift for 6 hours. Was that acting? Or was it real? Ethan was silent because he didn't know the answer. Had he done those things because he genuinely cared, or because of guilt, or because he wanted to make up for what his system had caused? He didn't know. That's the question I'll have to live with, Lily said, voice weary. And I don't want the answer from you, because whatever you say, I don't know if I should believe it. She turned away. Lily, just don't, she said, not looking back. Ethan stood watching her drive away. The car lights faded into the darkness, and he remained alone in the empty parking lot with the cold Seattle wind and an emptiness that no amount of money could fill. That night, Ethan went back to his penthouse. The 500 square meter apartment greeted him with its familiar silence. Lights automatically turned on when he walked in. The sound system asked if he wanted music. The coffee maker was ready to operate anytime. Ethan walked straight into the balcony. Seattle spread out below, millions of lights twinkling like stars fallen to earth. From here, he could see everything. His office building, the restaurants he owned, the hotels bearing his name. But he couldn't see Lily. Somewhere down there, she was trying to put Rosie to sleep in an apartment with a rusty air conditioner. Somewhere, Marcus was drinking beer alone after an exhausting shift. Somewhere, Denise was sitting by her husband's bed, worrying about next month's hospital bill. And Victor was celebrating his victory. Ethan picked up his phone. He could call his lawyer right now, fire Victor within 24 hours, freeze accounts, prosecute if there was enough evidence. He had the power to do all of that. But would that fix anything? Victor would be fired, maybe sued, maybe pay the price. But Lily still wouldn't trust him. Marcus would still look at him as a traitor, and the other employees would still think their boss was someone who played undercover to find reasons to cut staff. Ethan put the phone down. He needed to do more than that. Not just fire Victor, not just return the stolen money. He needed to show them. 3 days later, Ethan sent a notice to all employees of the Crimson Table. Not an email from HR, not a message through the company app, but a handwritten letter sent to each home address, with Ethan Mercer's signature in a single sentence. I have an apology to make, and I want to say it to you directly. Please give me a chance. Attached was the address of a small conference hall in downtown Seattle, and the time, 7 p.m. Saturday. Ethan stood on the small stage looking down at the rows of seats. Not everyone came, but most did. Marcus, Denise, Tommy, Mariah, and more than 20 others. They sat with skeptical eyes waiting to see what the man who had deceived them would say. Victor was also there. Ethan had invited him, not to confront, but to witness. Lily sat in the back row, closest to the exit, as if ready to leave at any moment. Ethan took a deep breath. 4 weeks ago, I came to the Crimson Table as a job applicant. He began, voice steadier than he expected. I lied about my identity. I pretended to be a regular waiter. That was wrong, and I apologize. Silence. But I don't apologize for doing it, he continued, because if I hadn't, I would never have known this. He turned on the screen behind him. Images appeared, pay stubs that had been manipulated, internal emails about the welfare fund, charts showing how much tip money was skimmed each month, and how much was actually spent on employees. Almost nothing. For 8 years, I believed this restaurant was running well because of the numbers on the reports, Ethan said. I was wrong. I trusted the wrong person, and you paid the price. Victor stood up, face flushed. This is slander. I can explain everything. Victor, Ethan said, voice calm, you'll have a chance to speak, but first, let the others speak. Silence. Then Marcus stood up, the man with 12 years of experience, the one who had taught Ethan how to carry a tray and how to dodge the manager. He stepped into the middle of the room. I didn't know who Mr. Mercer was when he came, Marcus said, voice deep and steady. I just knew Daniel was a new guy, kind of clumsy, but hardworking. And I knew that in 12 years working here, Daniel was the first person who dared stand up and ask why Lily had to ask permission to leave when her daughter was in the hospital. Denise stood up next. I had my hours cut after I asked for time off to take my husband to chemo, she said, voice shaking but clear. Mr. Nash said it was scheduling, but I knew the truth. Everyone knew. Tommy, Maria, a man whose name Ethan couldn't remember, but whose face he recognized, one by one they stood up. One by one their stories came out. No one yelled, no one cried, just truths, simple, specific, and undeniable. Victor couldn't say anything because every story had dates, had details, had witnesses. When the last story ended, Ethan stepped up again. Victor Nash is terminated immediately, he said. All tips skimmed over the past 3 years will be refunded in full with interest. And from today, the Crimson Table will have an employee council elected by you to oversee all decisions related to workers' rights. Victor stood up, face pale. You can't. I can, Ethan said. And I just did. Victor left the conference hall in silence. No one watched him go. After the meeting, Ethan found Lily. She stood in a corner of the hall, not applauding, not saying anything. I didn't come here to ask for your forgiveness, Ethan said. I came to say that you have the right to be angry, and you don't need to stop being angry just because I did one right thing. Lily looked at him. You think what you did today was right? I think it was the minimum I owe everyone. Lily nodded, not forgiving, not refusing, just acknowledging. I'm going to quit, she said. Ethan wasn't surprised, but it still hurt. Not because of you, Lily continued, but because I need a workplace where I don't have to be afraid. And even if you change the whole world, I still can't look at you without remembering the feeling of being deceived. I understand. Don't look for me, Lily said, turning away. At least not now. She walked to the door. Ethan didn't chase after her because he knew there were things that couldn't be rushed. Some wounds couldn't be healed with money or power. Only time could heal them. Lily graduated from the management training program with the highest score in her class. It was a program funded by the Mercer Foundation, but Ethan hadn't nominated her. Marcus had done that after seeing the recruitment notice on the restaurant bulletin board. You deserve it, Marcus said when Lily asked why. And this is a chance for you not to go hungry anymore. Lily had hesitated. She knew where the money came from. She knew who was behind that fund. But in the end, she applied, not because of Ethan, but because for the first time in 3 years, she believed she deserved more. 6 months after graduation, Lily stood in her new restaurant, not the Crimson Table, not any location belonging to Mercer Hospitality Group. This was a small restaurant in downtown Savannah where she had been invited to be manager after completing the training program. The restaurant had 20 tables, an open kitchen, and a view of a tree-lined street, not as grand as the Crimson Table, but warm. And most importantly, Lily was respected here. She was checking tables before opening when the door chimed. A man walked in, no suit, no fancy clothes, just a simple button-down shirt and jeans. Ethan Mercer. I have a reservation, he said. Table 7. Name's Daniel. Lily stopped. 6 months without seeing each other. 6 months without contact. 6 months of wondering what he was doing, if he still remembered her, if he cared, and now he was here. Table 7 is the worst table in the restaurant, and she said, voice flat but not cold. Next to the kitchen, noisy, and the longest wait. I know, Ethan said. I used to be a waiter. Lily looked at him. He hadn't changed much, maybe a little thinner, maybe a little more tired. But his eyes still looked at her in a way that no one else did. You came alone? She asked. I hope not. Silence. Lily placed the menu on table 7. Sit down, she said. I'll be back. Ethan sat and waited. 10 minutes later, Lily came back, not carrying food, not carrying a menu. She sat down across from him. What would you like to order? She asked. Ethan looked at her, the woman who had once given him half a sandwich in a dark kitchen corner, the woman who had looked at him with disappointment in the parking lot, the woman who had walked away without looking back. A second chance, he answered. We don't have that on the menu. Then I'll wait until you do. Lily looked at him for a long time. Then, for the first time since the day she learned the truth, she smiled. Not a big smile, just a slight curve at the corner of her mouth, but it was a real smile. I don't forgive you, she said. Not yet, maybe never. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Then what do you want? Ethan thought for a moment. I want to start over, he said, from the beginning. No fake name, no role playing, just me. Ethan Mercer, the man who once ate half a cold sandwich and cried alone in his car. Lily looked at him. You know that's not easy, she said. I know. You know I have a daughter and a new job and my own life that you have no right to intrude on. I know. Then why did you still come? Ethan didn't answer it immediately. He looked down at his hands, hands that had now become more calloused after 6 months of working in restaurants himself. After 6 months of not sitting in offices signing checks, but going into kitchens, helping wash dishes. Because in 35 years of life, you were the first person to give me something without expecting anything in return, he said. And I don't want to lose someone like that. Lily was silent. Rosie asks about you, she said after a while. She still keeps the pencil box. Drew through all of them, but still keeps the box. What did you tell her? I said Daniel had to go away. I didn't go away, Ethan said. I'm right here. Lily looked at him. Well then, she stood up. Sit here, I'll bring you an appetizer. Ethan nodded. Lily walked toward the kitchen, but before she disappeared through the door, she turned back. Ethan? He looked up. Next time, don't make a reservation under a fake name. Then she went into the kitchen, leaving Ethan alone with his first smile in 6 months. 1 year later, Ethan stood in front of a small house in the suburbs of Savannah. A 2-story house with a garden, a swing set, and enough space for a child to run and play. Not a mansion, not a penthouse, just an ordinary house in an ordinary neighborhood with ordinary neighbors. But it was the house that Lily and Rosie had moved into 3 months ago, after Lily got promoted and could afford the down payment. And it was the house Ethan visited every week, bringing home-cooked food, a skill he learned during his time as Daniel, and picture books for Rosie. Today, Rosie was drawing on the living room wall. Lily allowed it. That wall was painted with special erasable paint so Rosie could create freely without ruining the house. Rosie was drawing a house, crooked, uneven, just like the house she had drawn more than a year ago in the corner of the Crimson Table kitchen. But this time, there were 3 people standing outside. Who's this? Ethan asked, sitting down beside her. Mommy, me, and Daniel, Rosie said, not looking up. Daniel is like Daddy, but he's here instead of up in heaven. Ethan looked at the drawing. The man in the picture didn't have a detailed face, just a circle for a head and sticks for arms and legs. But on his chest was a small heart, just like the heart Rosie had drawn for Daddy Ryan. Rosie, Ethan said, voice gentle, I can't replace your daddy. Rosie looked up. Her big eyes looked at him with a seriousness beyond her 6 years. I know, she said. Daddy's in heaven, but Mommy says Daniel loves Mommy and me too, and you'll stay here. I'll stay here, Ethan said. I promise. Rosie nodded as if that were obvious. Then she went back to her drawing, continuing to color. Ethan looked down at his hands, hands that had completely changed after a year. No longer soft like before. No longer only knowing how to hold pens to sign checks. Now those hands knew how to carry trays, knew how to wash dishes, knew how to cook, knew how to hold a child's hand when she was scared. Lily walked in from the kitchen, carrying a tray of fresh-baked cookies. Done yet, little artist? She asked Rosie, setting the tray on the table. Not yet, Rosie said. I'm drawing the new house. Lily looked at the drawing, then looked at Ethan, then smiled. The smile he had waited for an entire year. Not a polite smile, not a forced smile, just the smile of someone who had walked through darkness and finally seen the light. Outside the window, Savannah's sunset spread across the small garden. The last rays of sun shone through the green leaves, creating shimmering patches of light on the ground. No applause, no grand wedding, just 3 people, once strangers, once hurt, once lost faith, who had finally found each other. In the small house, a little girl drew with 64 colored pencils. A mother stood next to the man she had once not trusted. And that man, the billionaire who had once disguised himself as a waiter, finally understood what money could not buy. It was the feeling of someone giving you half a sandwich, not because they wanted something, but simply because they saw you were hungry. And that perhaps was the most valuable thing in this world. Sometimes the richest people are the poorest in what truly matters. And sometimes half a sandwich from a stranger can change everything. In the quiet shadows of a bustling restaurant kitchen, a billionaire disguised as a struggling waiter learned the most devastating and beautiful truth of all. True wealth has nothing to do with bank accounts, penthouses, or power. It lives in the simple, selfless act of giving when you have almost nothing left to give. Lily, exhausted and barely surviving, shared half her cold sandwich with a stranger she thought was just another broke coworker. That small, trembling gesture of kindness sure broke Ethan open, revealing how blind he had become to the real human cost of his empire. One half sandwich taught him that empathy isn't a luxury. It's the only currency that never runs out. And generosity born from hardship carries more weight than any fortune ever could. Sometimes the richest moment of your life is when someone sees your hunger and chooses to feed you anyway. What small act of kindness, given or received, changed how you see the world? Share your story in the comments below. Your words might be the warmth someone desperately needs today. And if this tale touched the deepest part of your heart, please hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join our growing family of stories that remind us love and compassion are the only things worth building an empire around. Let's keep sharing the light together.